This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody on your best behavior. We're being recorded over here. Everything that you say may be used against you. Now, in all seriousness, do not be bashful at all. Okay, where are we up to? I think we're up to...
77.
Good, Kiddush. Okay, good. So we discussed that Shabbat has its don'ts and its do's. Okay? The don'ts are those 39 malachot. Where do those 39 malachot come from?
God creating world and creating space for us.
Yes, but where do the 39 come from? From the Mishkan. The Mishkan is the tabernacle. And that's how we get to what Natalie had just said, that Shabbos is we always say, Jews, we do our beliefs. We don't just sit on a mountaintop and meditate. We don't, I believe, we don't think about it. We do our beliefs. And the way we do our belief in God as a creator is that God stopped creating on the seventh day. He created the 6 days. He stopped creating on the seventh day. He didn't rest. Why didn't he rest? Who needs to rest?
He doesn't have to.
He doesn't have to. Who needs to rest?
Us.
Someone who gets tired needs to rest. God does not need to rest. When we say, on Shabbos, what did he do? Shabbat. He desisted. He stopped creating. He stopped shaping the world and forming the world and altering the world. So on Shabbos, we do our belief in God as a creator, that we stop creating, we stop shaping and altering the world to meet our needs, and rather we bask in the glory and the beauty of the world as God created it, with our family, with our community, with our friends. That is what we do on Shabbat. So the don'ts of Shabbat are from the Mishkan. Why is the Mishkan related to Shabbat? So as Natalie said, Shabbat, creation, is God making a space in his world for us. Mishkan is us carving out a space in our world for God. And that is why the Mishkan, the tabernacle, has all of these laws of holiness, of purity, impurity, because that's entering a God zone. The same way that God fashioned, created space for us and made it a place that accommodates us, so too the Mishkan needs to be a place that, so to speak, accommodates God. And that's why it has all of those. So the 39, the sages break down 39 different Av Melachot, important term to know. Av is like a father, main Melachot, the main acts that went into the building of the Mishkan. So we have Av and we have Tolda. The same way that you have a parent and you have the Nolad, the Yelud, the Tolda, the child who comes from the parent. We have those main Malachot, main 39, and then there are the derivatives of those. But those are considered to be equally Torah level as the Av themselves. For example, the second Av, the first Av is plowing. We'll go through these. You don't have to knock this down. Just understand the concept. The second one is planting. So planting is something that enables the growth of something that is planted. Watering is then a tolda. It is a derivative of planting, right? Because that too enables things. It's a direct act that enables things to grow. Okay? So we have the don'ts of Shabbos. Those are the 39. And a good part of this book will be going through that. I will remind me next time. I'll bring it in. There's also another book that looks like a kid's book, and that's the Rabbi Che. Do you guys have that? Sorry? Yeah, it looks like it's a kid's book. It's in, Adam would love it, right? It's in somewhat not cartoon form, but what's the term? Yes, yes. It's illustrated in a manner like a book. It would be illustrated, and it goes through each of the 39 and applications that apply to us. Actually, earlier iterations of Jewish journeys, we used that book, but since then I've switched to this. Right, this is just a little more. I should this whatever a different format, which I thought would be a clearer format. But that is an excellent book. So we have the don'ts of Shabbos, those are the 39, and we have the do's of Shabbos. Okay? We learn this out from the Ten Commandments is written twice in the Torah. It's written in the book of Shmot, Exodus, when it actually real time, it's talking about when it happened, and then it's mentioned again in Devarim, Deuteronomy, when Moshe is recounting. But there are some differences between the first one in Shmot and Exodus and the second mention of it in Devarim, Deuteronomy. Because the second one, Moshe does some paraphrasing and explaining to the people. However, a glaring difference is in the first one, it says, Zachor, remember, mention the day of Shabbat to make it holy. And in Devarim, Moshe says that God said, Shamor, guard, which would mean abstaining in order to make the day of Shabbat holy. So as we sing in the Lachadodi song Friday night, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. God at Sinai simultaneously said, Shamor and Zachor. Right? Don't try this at home. We can't do that. But God sent them both simultaneously. And that's why we have both of this, the don'ts of Shabbos and the do's of Shabbos. What is the do of Shabbos? Zachor. Paz, what does Zachor mean? Either to remember, or it could also be to mention, right? So therefore, we mention Shabbat as it comes in and as it goes out. That is the Torah obligation of the do of Shabbat. The same way when you have a very important guest, so it doesn't just amble in and amble out. They are welcomed in, they are escorted out. So therefore we mention the Shabbat as it comes in. Where do we mention it? That is in the Kiddush that we say. Okay? That is the Kiddush. And in order to lend it importance, reverence, we do it over a cup of wine. What else do we add reverence and thereby do it over a cup of wine?
Bread.
I'm sorry?
Bread.
No, not necessarily. Right? Only on Shabbat we have the Kiddush. There are other milestone Jewish events which are done over a cup of wine. Please God, each of you will be under a chuppah at some point for a beautiful, proper Jewish wedding. And in addition to the wedding blessings, we make the blessing over a cup of wine. And at a Brit Milah, circumcision, we make the blessings over a cup of wine. Pidyon haben, redemption of the firstborn son. Oh, we do it, the blessings over a cup of wine. Okay? Havdalah. Well, Havdalah, yes, good. So we welcome Shabbat in with the Kiddush. We escort Shabbat out with Havdalah and the blessing of separation. Havdalah is separating between the holy and the mundane, right? And we have a very nice, after Mariv, on Saturday night, we have a group that we all make Havdalah together, and it's nice to those who can to be here to experience that, right? To see how that comes down. And so we have the blessing of separation, and we also have the blessing over a cup of wine to give reverence to that. Now, we also learned last week that women are equally obligated in Kiddush on Shabbat. Why might I have thought that women would not be obligated in Kiddush on Shabbat?
Because they're not bound by time-bound obligation.
Good, because women are not obligated in the positive time-bound mitzvot. Women are a walking time-bound mitzvah. Women have a natural cycle that's part of being a woman. Men do not have any time-bound cycles that our body works according to. So women are exempt from positive time-bound mitzvot. And that's why a woman is not obligated to sit in a sukkah or to shake the lulav and etrog. Beautiful things to do. Many women opt to do it. Beautiful, but not obligated. Shabbat, women, the Kiddush is a positive time-bound mitzvah. Women are obligated in that. Why is that? That comes back to what we said before. Shamor, v'zachor, b'dibor echad. The do's and the don't of Shabbat were said simultaneously. And therefore, women are obligated in all of the don'ts, all of the prohibitions, women are obligated. So since the don't and the do of Shabbat were said simultaneously, therefore, whoever's obligated in the don'ts is obligated in the do's. Therefore, women are fully obligated in Kiddush. When it comes to Havdalah, we'll see towards further on in the book, that's going to be interesting. Why might Havdalah be a little bit different? The question is Havdalah part of Shabbos or is it post-Shabbos? If it's part of Shabbos, then women are fully obligated in all the dues of Shabbos. But if it's post-Shabbos, so then it's a positive time-bound mitzvah that's not coupled, lying on top of the don'ts of Shabbat, and therefore women would not be obligated. Women do hear Havdalah, but we'll see when we get there some of the ramifications of this safek, of this in-between sort of status. Just to know, one other example of a positive time-bound mitzvah that women are obligated in, yes, but that's yes, correct, but that's part of the Shabbat. That's part of the Shabbat. How are you?
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Coming in, 1 second.
I'm going to the Sephardic community.
Okay.
My grandpa's here today.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thanks much, Michael. Good to see you.
Very nice to see you.
Okay. Good to see you.
Sorry, everyone.
Don't be sorry. You only add luster, Michael. Good to see you.
You have a fan club.
I think when it comes to Hannah, I haven't seen in a while. So it takes a little while to say who it is. Yeah, but he's a great guy, Michael. Yeah. Okay. So, which other holiday mitzvah that'll be time bound are women going to be obligated in?
Yom Kippur?
Well, there aren't that many dues. Well, that's interesting. I guess the due of Yom Kippur is to do teshuvah. I guess we're always obligated in that. That's not a time-bound mitzvah.
Shabbat?
Chalent?
Shabbat. The one that we receive Torah?
Shavuot, but again, there aren't really Chalent for sure, but there aren't really positive time-bound mitzvot of Shavuot. How about Pesach, guys? Right? Women are obligated in the Seder, in eating the matzah and all those things. Why is that? Well, there too, the same verse that says, don't eat the chametz, don't eat the leavened, says, eat the matzah. And therefore, women are obligated. The same thing we have the don't of Shabbos, the do of Shabbos together. We have the don't of chametz, the do of matzah together. Therefore, women are fully obligated in that. The Gemara actually discusses how about Purim and Hanukkah, that women are obligated. Why? Because not only were they part of the miracle that took place, but they actually played a pivotal role in the miracle that took place. Both of Purim, certainly everybody knows that was Esther, right? And also Hanukkah, that there was a very beautiful Jewish woman who the Assyrian Greeks, generals very much wanted to be intimate with her, and she invited the head to come, and she chopped off his head. And that's what started the whole revolt and led to the overthrow of the Assyrian Greeks, control over the temple and the rededication of the temple. Okay, but I digress. So let's go to 77. So the women are fully obligated in Kiddush. The cup used for Kiddush should contain at least a revius, That's about 3 to 5 ounces. Okay, and it should be a nice cup. It must be whole without defects or cracks. Before Kiddush, the cup should be rinsed with water, both inside and out. I think someone asked last time, how much in advance, right? It doesn't need to be right beforehand, right? It should be rinsed with water, right? That's not an absolute obligation, but it's a good thing to do. Okay, 78. The cup must be full when Kiddush is recited. Okay, if someone took a drink from the cup of wine or directly from the wine bottle before Kiddush, the wine becomes unfit for Kiddush. Okay, so none of you should be drinking from the bottles. Okay, even if you have it in a paper bag, it still will not change the halacha over here. Right, we won't get arrested and do it publicly, but that's not how we do things. Okay.
So I have a question about that. So,
Yeah.
Can you pour the bottle of wine into cups, or is it usually you make kiddush first and then?
Okay. So,
Or is it just drinking from the bottle? That's not.
okay. Once that cup or that wine has been drank from directly, then it will no longer be used for the elevated. It's kind of like leftover. So it will no longer be used for this elevated usage of wine of making Kiddush. Okay? Now, typically, at Kiddush Friday night, only the person who's making Kiddush needs to actually drink from it. Okay? No one else needs to drink wine or grape juice or anything, right? Generally, we have a rule that one person who's obligated can do the mitzvah on behalf of others who are obligated. So here it's a mitzvah to recite it. The person reciting it has in mind those who are assembled. Those who are assembled need to have in mind, so he has in mind that his doing it will help them fulfill their obligation. They have to have in mind that they want to fulfill their obligation through his recital. We need the intent of both the one doing and those who are, so to speak, receiving. They don't need to drink wine, okay? If they like to drink wine or grape juice, they're more than welcome to, okay? If sometimes people will fill up their cups by themselves, and after the person makes Kiddush, they'll drink from their own cups. There is a concept that to have from the wine that the bracha was made on, and therefore very often the person making Kiddush will pour out for other people to drink. Okay? So what I do is I first will pour off into a cup. I'll have some. I'll give to my wife Natalie to have some. And then from that same Kiddush cup, which I haven't drank from because I don't want to gross out anyone who's there, like, oh, the rabbi drank it. I'm supposed to drink. I don't want backwash, right? And I don't want rabbinic backwash, right? So therefore, in order to make sure that no one feels uncomfortable, right? And actually, we spoke about this Shavuot night. The Gemara talks about how not to give other people your backwash, basically. If you drank from something there, they says if you drank from it, pour off a little bit from where your mouth drank. It won't exactly clean it that well. At least it will clean it somewhat. Okay, but anyhow, then I pour from my Kiddush cup into smaller cups, and everyone gets to drink from that Kiddush. But you don't have to. You don't like wine. You don't like grape juice. One does not need to drink from that. Okay?
How about the Chabbadic way, like from the Chabad? Rabbi does the Kiddush with his own cup, but then the small cups they give it to the other people.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily a Chabad way, but that's what I said that I do also.
Okay,
right? That I make Kiddush and then I pour into little cups, right? And Shabbos afternoon when I make Kiddush over here, right? I make Kiddush, I pour into one of the cups, right? And then Natalie helps pour other cups, and right, and right. So there's a little bit of the Kiddush in each of those cups, small cups, and then I drink from the Kiddush cup, right? But not before anyone else is going to be drinking from that grape juice. juice. Yes,
Brother,
Lily.
so you pour the wine or grape juice into the Kiddush cup, and then Natalie will separate it to the other little smaller cups, and then she gives it back to you, and you drink the rest.
At home?
Yeah.
No. So I make Kiddush using a nice Kiddush cup. Then I take some of that, I pour it into a glass.
Oh, okay.
I drink from that.
Mhm.
Natalie drinks from that. And then the Kiddush cup I
Oh,
use
I see.
from the Kiddush cup to pass around. It's not like that's how it has to be done.
Mhm.
That's how I like to do it.
Just so that
I do
everyone
wanna-
else isn't drinking.
From that which I drank from. Yeah, besides my wife.
And then also, do you fill it up to the rim, or it needs to overflow?
It doesn't need to overflow. Okay? By Havdalah, right? Everybody familiar with Havdalah? Havdalah is what we say over a cup of wine at the end of Shabbat. Havdalah means to separate, separating from Shabbat, going into the week. Havdalah, there is this concept of overflowing the cup, right? Havdalah, we're looking for a redemption that week. That's what much of the Havdalah talks about. So we want the blessing to overflow. So with that in mind, we overflow the Havdalah cup.
Mhm.
But the Kiddush cup does not need to be overflowed. Overflowed? I know that's a word, right? You don't need to, whatever the case. Okay. Overflowed. Okay. So one way remedy this by adding a little wine and other liquid to the wine. Meaning, let's say, look at the last one. If wine is left over in the cup after Kiddush, and one wishes to return the wine to the bottle to be used another time, the custom is to add unused wine to it before pouring it back. Okay, so you don't want to have wine that has already been drank from, right, as a to be used for Kiddush again, but you could remedy that by adding in a little extra. Okay, that we don't need to go through all that.
So you're saying like a bottle that was not finished cannot be used?
No, only a bottle that someone picked up the bottle
And put, oh,
right, and drank from that bottle.
okay.
But otherwise, you have your bottle, right? Costco has these 3-quart bottles of grape juice, right? Right? We don't go through one of those at a Kiddush, right?
Yeah.
We pour off, put it back into the fridge, and we're good to go. Okay? Only if you drank directly from that, right? The same way if I drank directly from this cup, then I would not use that for the elevated consecrated Kiddush usage. If I drank from the bottle, I would not use that for the elevated consecrated Kiddush usage. And a way to remedy that is pouring some other wine or grape juice into that, and then it restores its pristine state, that now it can be used, right, for Kiddush. Okay, but again, that's only if you drank. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, the one who's reciting the Kiddush should pick up the cup with both of his hands to demonstrate his love for the mitzvah. When starting reciting, hold the cup in his right hand. According to Kabbalah, the base on the cup should rest on the palm of the hand, with the fingers facing upwards around the cup. All of these are ways to do it. They're not the only way to do it. It's not that you have to do it this way. The cup should be lifted at least a tefach 4 inches above the table. When one begins to recite Kiddush, he should stand erect a short while in honor of God, since God's name is hinted in the initial letters of the first words of Kiddush, right? There are various customs concerning whether to sit or stand while reciting Kiddush. Okay, so there's a reason to stand, there's a reason to sit, and therefore some people stand, some people sit, some people first stand and then sit. Paz, what do you do?
In our family, it's the men stand, the women sit.
Okay, so we're going to discuss that, right? In general, I like the idea of the man standing and the woman sitting. I know for Kiddush, I don't know if that's the best idea, but if that's your family minhag, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm not going to make Trishi have to stand up. Okay? But we will discuss that. Okay. So the first half of the Kiddush is Vayichulu Hashemayim va'aretz, that God completed the heavens and the earth, right? And that is considered to be like testimony. Witnesses, when delivering their testimony, need to be standing. Therefore, there are those that say you should stand for Kiddush because it involves testimony. Now, Kiddush, we'll soon see, needs to be at the place where you're having your meal. It's called b'makom su'udah, where you are having your meal. Kiddush needs to be b'makom su'udah. Now, what establishes that I'm set here for my meal? Sitting establishes I'm not on the go, right? I'm sitting here. I'm established here for the meal. And therefore, that's a reason to sit for Kiddush. Now, there's a great story, very instructive story, actually, that someone once asked a great rabbi, right, what do you do for Kiddush, right? Do you stand or sit, right? And he wanted to follow what his Rebbe did. Very noble. The only thing is, when it comes to that, you're supposed to follow the minhag, the custom of your family, your father, not what your rabbi did. So the rabbi very wisely answered, oh, what do I do for Kiddush? Meaning, you want to do like I do? I do what my father did. And therefore, oh, thank you so much. And therefore, if you want to do like I'm doing, what should you do? Like your father, not like my father. Like your father, exactly. Right? So you should follow what your father. Thank you very much.
I was just going to ask you, well, what do you do? But now I know.
I do. Well, that's funny. That's funny because I do what my father did, and my brother does what my father did, what our father did. But he stands and I sit.
Oh,
Because there were, I think my father used to stand, and then when he heard that you could sit, he liked that idea. So I remember my dad sitting. So I sit. I sit when I make Kiddush. Okay? So there are those that stand, there are those that sit, there are those that stand for the first half and then sit for the second half. They stand for the testimony part and they sit for the other bracha, the other blessing, in order to establish that I'm here. This is the place of my suda. I'm at the place of my meal. So different customs. Now, typically we say that whatever the mevarech, the one making the blessing, is doing, that's what the others who are being yotze along with that person. Again, yotze means literally to go through, right? To fulfill their obligation. So typically we say whatever the mevarech, the one making the blessing, is doing, others should follow suit. And that's why when we're having a meal here at the shul, right? So before I make Kiddush, being that I sit, I announce I sit for Kiddush. Therefore, those who are being yotze along with me ideally should be sitting, right? But if you, my dear friend Paz, have a set family minhag that the men set, that the men stand and the women sit, then I'm not going to get in the way of that. Okay. Now, if one is sitting, though, right, look at the last paragraph, all right, in the middle of the last paragraph on 78, right? Since God's name is hinted at in the initial letters of the first four words of Kiddush, Yom Hashishi Vayuchulu Hashamayim. For the Hebrew readers over there, right, we're starting with the Yud. First word starts with the Yud. Second word starts with a Hey. Next word starts with a Vav. Last word starts with a Hey. Yud, Hey, Vav. And then a Hey spells that name of God. And therefore I do sit, but I lean forward when I say Yom HaShishi Vayuchulu Hashamayim. I lean forward somewhat for, right? I don't stand erect, but I do lean forward as I'm saying that. But these are all beautiful minhagim. The obligation is to say Kiddush over a cup of wine or grape juice. Okay, so let's hear what he says over here. 80. Well, when a number of people are having their Shabbos meal together, the custom that the host or one of the men present recites Kiddush aloud and exempts the others. Exempts, that's what we say, the term Hebrew word is to be motze. They're being yotze, the others. The reason this is done is that a king is more glorified when a multitude joins to honor him. Meaning we want to do things as a large group. We want to do things together, right? I.e., God is more revered by many people joining together to recite one Kiddush. Like we said, the one reciting Kiddush have in mind to exempt all those present. They must listen to the Kiddush having in mind to be exempted. I mentioned that before. They must hear every word of the Kiddush. At the end of each blessing, they would answer Amen. Okay? Are you guys familiar with a Baruch Hu uVaruch Shemo? Okay, so during, let's say, the repetition of the Amidah during davening, so when the Chazan makes the blessing, he says, Baruch Atah, blessed are you, Hashem, saying God's name, and everyone hears God's name, they say, Baruch Hu uVaruch Shemo, blessed is he, and blessed is his name. Now, that's what I can answer to your bracha. But if your bracha is becoming my bracha, meaning I'm being yotze along with you, so it's as if I am making that bracha, then I don't want to interrupt, so one would not say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. Okay. The one who recited Kiddush drinks a cheek full of wine, the greater part of Revius. He should drink this amount without delay. Okay. Important there not be any interruption like talking between hearing the Kiddush and drinking the wine. It is preferable, but not required, like I said before, that all those present also have a taste of the wine, right? So preferable to have a taste of the wine that was used. Doesn't have to be that wine, doesn't have to be wine or grape juice at all, but it is preferable, it's ideal to have a little bit of that wine because that wine is what the bracha was made upon. You guys ever hear about a tish? A Hasidische tish? Okay, so tish is Yiddish for a table. So yes, at a wedding, we have, as the bride is sitting there in a regal chair surrounded by the mothers, whoever else is there, and everyone is coming to greet her. This is before we get to the chuppah. The groom is sitting at the chasan's, the groom's tish, the groom's table, right? And that's where the ketubah, the wedding document, is signed, and lots of other legalities are taken care of. So that's also called a tish. But a Hasidic tish is that Hasidic rabbis, on a Friday night, they'll have their table set. Meaning after davening, people will go home and have a meal quick and then come back to the Rebbe's tish. And these big rabbis in Israel, let's say the Belzer Rebbe, will have a tish with thousands of people there, right? Massive table, right? And the dignitaries are sitting there, and then there are these rafters, these bleachers for all the other Hasidim. It's quite a scene. And the idea is the Rebbe will make a bracha over the food, and others will get a piece of that. A piece of that. Why? Because you want to have something that a bracha was made over it. And if the Rebbe made a bracha over it, a blessing over it, wow, I could have something that the Rebbe made a bracha over. Remember, at the Bel's Tish, right, they'll have this cart. Remember, there are thousands of people there. They'll have this cart, right, with trays, all filled with apples. And the Rebbe will put his hands on the tray and say, Baruch Hashem, holding one apple, Bori Priya Eitz. And then he'll have a bite of that apple. And then other apples will be distributed around. So everybody got a part of that. So there is this concept of partaking of something that a bracha was made on it. And therefore, it is preferable, is nice to get a taste of the wine that the Kiddush was made on. And that's why, let's say Shabbos afternoon here at Kiddush. So I'll make Kiddush over, I'll use a cup of Kiddush cup, and then I'll pour into, now I will have like 5 or 6 or 7, 8 cups this size, half filled with grape juice, and I'll pour into one of those, and she'll take that one, and she'll pour into each of those other 7 cups, right? And then we'll take from those cups and pour into little cups, and some people come take the big cups and pour into their little cups, but that way there is a little bit of the Kiddush wine that a bracha was made over that everyone is partaking of, but it does not need to be, you don't need to have that, okay? Whereas hamotzi, the blessing over the bread, the hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the blessing that God brought the bread out from the earth, that everyone needs to have a part of that. Why? Because everyone needs to have a seuda, a meal. And on Shabbat, at least the first 2 meals need to be bread-based meals. Okay? Now, so you have to have some of the bread. You don't have to have some of the Kiddush, which leads us to an interesting etiquette issue, right? I don't want to take for myself. I want to pass to others, and then I'll have, right? Very, very nice, very honorable, okay? When it comes to the grape juice, that if you want to do that, you certainly can do that. Why? Because there's no mitzvah for you to drink that grape juice. So you're not passing a mitzvah by. But by hamotzi, that is where you should not have this, oh, let me give to others first and I'll take. No, because since you have an obligation to eat some of that bread, right? So therefore, what do you have over there? It's a mitzvah for you to eat some of that bread. And we have a general rule, ein ma'avirin al ha-mitzvot. You don't pass a mitzvah by, right? So by the grape juice, if you want to be very, very polite and honorable and pass to others first and then for yourself, that's fine. When it comes to hamotzi, right, you should first take a piece and then pass it on, because you don't, in general, we don't want to pass by a mitzvah, right? A mitzvah comes to your hands, you are meant to do that. Okay.
One question.
Yes.
Are you allowed to do Kiddush over water if you don't have
No.
wine, or how about tea?
No.
It has to be alcohol?
Not alcohol, it could be grape juice,
Oh,
but it needs to be either a wine or a grape juice.
oh, the only 2 options.
Shabbos day, there could be, there in Havdalah, it is less. Now, if a person doesn't have wine, then a person can make Kiddush, everybody know this? Over the challah. Okay? Typically, we make Kiddush over the wine, we wash Netilat Yadayim, we wash our hands, we make hamotzi. If a person does not have wine or grape juice, then one would start the meal by washing their hands for hamotzi, and then they go lift up the challahs, say the whole Kiddush, the same way we make Kiddush over a cup of wine, we'll make the Kiddush over the challahs, the exception being, instead of the blessing being, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Borei pri hagafen, blessed are you God, who created the fruits of the vine, you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Instead of making the blessing, the wine blessing, you'd make the bread blessing. So if one doesn't have wine or grape juice, then one would make it over that. All right? Yeah. It's funny. Nana and I were once traveling, and we were. There's not going to be kosher bread where we were going to, and we're not big bread eaters. But for Shabbos, we need bread, right? So we brought along a bag of pita, right? Right. Pita is always right. Is always easy, right? You have 2 loaves, you have some pita. Also good to have a box of matzah in the house. That way it's an easy 2 pieces. We'll get to hamotzi soon, right? But actually we're traveling to point A and then to point B. So in point A, we put the pita into the little mini fridge in the hotel room, and there it remained, right? So we learned the lesson. From now on, whenever we do that, I put my shoe into the refrigerator also.
Did you forget? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we forgot the pita there.
Oh, okay.
So then we learned the lesson. I put my shoe or something that I'm not going to walk out without
Oh, yeah.
into the refrigerator, and that way we know for sure we're going to get what we need, what's in the fridge. Or it doesn't have to be a shoe, but anything that you know you're not going to walk out without, you can put into the fridge. So we actually had a little thing of grape juice. Otherwise, we think I have to buy some grapes and start squeezing it. That'll take a lot of grapes to get about 3 to 5 ounces. But so we didn't have bread for Friday night, right? So Natalie quickly Googled, right? How can you make? When we travel, we bring along our toaster oven, so that we could heat things up in a kosher way even when we're traveling. So how can you make bread in a toaster oven? There was a recipe that just flour and there was just, I don't know, something very, very simple, basic ingredients that we were able to get there. Some of them which didn't need a hechsher, some whatever it was. Like, I told you guys about the CRC app on the phone, right?
Yeah.
Right? That is gold, right? So you'll see there that which ingredients do need a hechsher, sort of kosher certification, which ones don't. So she ended up making us these two little breads somewhat in the toaster oven. So we had our lechem mishnah. But if a person doesn't have grape juice or wine and does have bread, so then you make hamotzi on the bread. Okay, 81, covering the challahs. Oh, and what to do if wine is not available. Okay, yes.
One last question. Does it have to be like you need a metal fancy cup? Is that like a requirement, or is that just part of the?
It doesn't need to be a metal fancy cup. Typically we like to beautify our mitzvot. So since this will be used for a mitzvot, right? It does not need to be that. It could be a glass, right? Ideally, not a disposable cup. Ideally, not a disposable cup, but if necessary, even a disposable cup. But you want to use a goblet or a ceramic, right? All of those are fine. It just, as we saw before, they give us some diagrams. It shouldn't be cracked or whatever it is, bent, cracked, crooked edge, right? But Shelby, it could be any non-disposable. Okay, covering the challahs. Okay, and what to do if wine is not available for the Kiddush. 81. The table should be covered with a tablecloth, right, in order to lend gravitas to this meal, right? We want it to be a nice, proper meal. And a cloth should be spread over the Shabbos challahs. The challahs should remain covered until after the Kiddush and the blessing of Hamotzi. Okay. Why do we cover over the challah? Two main reasons. Got one for us, Orly?
It should be covered while you're doing the.
Wait, you didn't call me yesterday.
I didn't.
How did it go? Oh, you tell me afterwards.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have to talk. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay.
You don't want to embarrass.
Okay. So one reason that we give is an interesting reason, and that is typically bread is the prima donna when it comes to meals, right? That's the bracha you make, and that counteracts, overrides any other blessing. So the bread is always first. On Friday night, the wine is going before the bread. So therefore, we don't want to embarrass the bread. So we cover it. Now, does bread get embarrassed?
No.
Bread does not get embarrassed. So what am I talking about over here? How does this make any sense whatsoever?
Is it more showing that both of them are important and we don't want to essentially disadvantage one?
Okay. Yeah, but it's not going to get. It's okay. So typically bread goes first. Now halachically, according to halacha, the grape juice goes first, wine goes first. So that's going to go first, right? Why are we worried about hurting the bread's feelings? Yes.
Maybe I was thinking maybe treating the bread Shabbos like treating the bride, like this.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay,
Okay,
we'll come to that soon. Okay, but the idea is, well, there's a famous teaching by the plagues that Moshe and Aaron brought onto the Egyptians. So striking the water and turning it to blood, or striking the water and the frogs surging out from there, the first two plagues were not done by Moshe, were done by Aaron. Why were they not done by Moshe? Well, the water had saved Moshe's life. When did the water save Moshe's life?
And his baby.
He was a baby. He was put into this little basket and put into the water. The water held him up. The water saved his life. Therefore, it would not be right for Moshe to strike the water. Okay? The water's not going to say, hey, after all I've done for you, right? But if I do an act of disregard, then I become a disregarding person. If I do an act of sensitivity, an act of appreciation, then I become a sensitive and appreciative person. So it was not for the water, it was for Moshe. We have a beautiful concept in Hebrew for our Israelis over here, Ori and Paz, Adam nif'al kafi pu'ulotav. We are acted upon by our actions. What we do affects who we are and what we become. Take a kind person and make him an executioner, he's going to become not as kind. Take a not kind person and have him give out lollipops to kids on Shabbos, he'll become a nice person. Even if he didn't start off like that, right? Our actions will impact who, what we are, okay? That's why Moshe was not the one to hit the water. Not for the water, but for him. Now let's bring it back to our challah, our bread getting embarrassed. If we show sensitivity for the feelings, so to speak, even of inanimate objects, then that will turn us into sensitive people who are concerned about the feelings of others. Okay? So that is one approach. The other approach is, well, we're supposed to have 2 loaves of bread when we're making hamotzi. So I mentioned before, it's good to have pita or matzah in the house, and that way you'll always have your what's called lechem mishnah, your double bread. Why 2 loaves when we're making hamotzi Friday night and Shabbat day? That's to remind us of
10 Commandments?
The double portion of manna that fell from the heaven, all right, in preparation for Shabbat. Even though the double portion fell on Friday, right, but that was to give us the portion of Shabbat, and it showed us that God provides during the week in order to take you through Shabbat. And therefore on Shabbat also, ain't going to work on Saturday. We recognize that I'm not going to gain anything by going to work on Saturday. God provides the means that we need during the week to cover us on Shabbat. Therefore, to remember the manna, and the blessing of Shabbat, we have lechem mishnah. We need to make hamotzi Friday night and Shabbat day on 2 loaves of bread or 2 rolls, right? Like you see when we set up Kiddush on Shabbat over here, we have a basket full of rolls. You'll see people who wash the Tilat Yadayim, pick up one of the rolls, hold it over or next to one of the other rolls, make hamotzi, and then eat from that roll. And that way the hamotzi was made over lechem mishnah, over 2 loaves. Okay, so the 2 loaves are to remind us of the man. So now the second paragraph of the first diamond over there, right? One of the reasons why the 2 Shabbat loaves are covered from top and bottom, as it were, is because they are a remembrance of the manna, which the Israelites ate in the desert, which was protected by an upper and lower layer of dew. Okay? And that's why we said that it should be covered until the time, right? Or until the time of the hamotzi. Because if the reason, let's get Talmudic, guys, if the reason was only because of to not embarrass the bread when you're making Kiddush, then once I finish making Kiddush, I can then uncover the bread. It's no longer an issue. But because it's also a remembrance of the manna, therefore we keep it covered all the way until the time that we make our hamotzi. Okay, and now the second diamond on 81, we mentioned this before already. If no wine is available, the Friday night Kiddush is recited on challah, or bread. In this case, the hands are washed for the meal before Kiddush. Instead of reciting Bar Priya Gefen, which is the wine blessing in Kiddush, one recites the blessing of Hamotzi, which is the bread blessing in Kiddush. This is the only change made in the text of the Kiddush. The one who recites the Kiddush should place his hands on the Shabbat loaves until he has finished Kiddush. The same way that we're making Kiddush, one holds the cup the whole time making Kiddush. If you're doing it over bread, one holds the bread the whole time while making Kiddush.
Is there any difference between holding cup like this and like this?
Kabbalistically, they say to hold like that. I just hold it usually like that.
Rabbi Seymour,
Yes.
for the challah, is there a reason why some people pour salt over their challah?
Yes. So I'll probably go into that, but yes, our table is meant to be in the place of the altar that was in the temple. Okay? And right, the same way that the altar atoned and brought us together as one nation, so to our table and the hosting that we do and the blessings that we do atones and brings us all together as one nation. The sacrifices needed to be salted. The reason is that salt is this permanence, is this, right? It's a preservative, right? That shows this idea of permanence. So too, when it comes to our bread at the table, similar to the altar, we also have salt on the table, and the challah is dipped into the salt. Okay, so that is related to the sacrifices. Okay, let's just do one more. 82, as we mentioned, Kiddush must be recited where the meal will be held. And we said before, Kiddush b'makom su'udah, in the place of the meal. This means that one must begin the meal immediately after Kiddush in the place where Kiddush was recited. Okay.
So you cannot have a dinner then. You have to wait until you finish doing the Kiddush on Shabbos.
On Shabbos, the Kiddush should not be at the end of the meal. The Kiddush needs to start the meal. Now, if Adam is hungry, wants to eat beforehand, right? So he can eat some things beforehand and then join for the meal afterwards. Now, when we say in the place of the meal, that is bread.
Okay.
Okay? Now, ideally, one should not be full and then, right? One Shabbos again, you don't want to eat. But first, an 8 in the afternoon, right? But that's where the meal needs to be, and the meal should be a bread meal. Okay? One washes. Now, what he says here, the meal, one must begin the meal immediately after the Kiddush. Doesn't have to be immediately after Kiddush, but it needs to be in the place, right? Meaning, if it's 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, right, that's also not going to be an issue. But it needs to be in the place where Kiddush was recited. One washes one's hands, recites the blessing of Al Nitilat Yadayim, on the washing of the hands, dries the hands, right? And this we learned before, this is a second exception. Typically, you make the bracha and then do the mitzvah. But by the lighting of the candles, right, you lit the candles and then make the bracha, right? Here too, right? Typically, one would make the blessing, then wash the hands. Here, we first wash our hands, then make the blessing. But we should be careful to make the blessing before you dry your hands. Why before you dry your hands? Because the mitzvah is to wash and dry the hands. And therefore, if we're not going to do the bracha before we start the mitzvah, we want to at least be sure to do the bracha before we finish the mitzvah. At least do it while we are in the middle of the mitzvah. Okay.
Can you cut the challah in half if you don't have two loaves?
No. That won't be two challahs. That way you won't even have one whole challah. For that, get a box of matzah. That's my father-in-law's thing. Always have matzah in the house, right? Have a box of matzah, and that way.
Because the Wholesome Choice sells challah like this big.
Exactly.
Like, what am I going to eat this?
Exactly. Well, Wholesome Choice also sells bags of 6 rolls in them.
Okay.
So a roll could also serve as one of your 2 lechem, or both lechem mishas, depending how much you're going to be eating, right?
Even by rolls, as in like there's not a challah, it's not a challah roll. It's just a regular bread.
Okay, it doesn't need to say challah on it.
Okay.
Right? As long as it's a complete loaf or roll,
okay.
Right? So they'll sell bags of whole wheat and regular rolls there. Those are right. They're also from Sunflower Bakeries, kosher. That will also count. Doesn't need to be a bag of challah per se. Okay, but it can't be sliced bread.
Okay.
Right? It could be pita. It could be pita. So if you like that big challah, make sure you have along with that a pita, a roll, a matzah.
So sorry, you cannot fold the pita and make it like that.
No.
Okay.
No, it's got to be 2. I'm Bli Neder. I'm going to buy you a box of matzah. Okay. Let's take care of this problem. Let's put this baby to rest. Okay? Yeah. No breaking it, no folding it. Okay. 2 loaves of any type or of bread. Here we go. 2 types of any type of bread. Buns, challahs, pitas, matzah may be used as long as they are whole. 2 breads are taken in remembrance of the double portion of manna which fell on Friday to suffice for both Friday and Shabbat. Okay. Just one last thing. So we call the Shabbos bread challah. Okay? Now, what actually is challah?
You said this on the first. It is.
When baking a large amount of dough, 5 pounds of dough. Yes, Shelby. Good. You have to take off part of it and give it to the Kohanim. Nowadays, we don't know who a real Kohen is, and everyone's in a state of impurity. So we need to take it off, and we burn it to make sure that no one will mistakenly eat it. So the challah is actually the part of the bread that we don't eat. The rest of the bread is the non-challah. So why do we call our Shabbos bread challah? It's actually the non-challah.
So complicated.
So the reason we call it challah is because what's important to us is the mitzvah that was part of it. So that's why we call it challah, even though it's the anti-challah, it's the non-challah. But what we love to do is the mitzvah. Therefore, we call it challah. So this is really important, guys. So if you ever at someone's house for a Shabbos meal, and you ask to say a little Devar Torah, some words of Torah. So you always want to have some Devar Torah up your sleeve that's not tied to that week's Parsha reading. Because if it's tied to the Parsha reading, you have a 1 in 54 chance of getting it right. But the other 53 weeks, if they ask you, do you want to say something? You're not going to have anything to say. So you want to have something that's Shabbat, meal related, but not to the Parsha. And this is gold right here. This is gold, right? You could say, why do we call this challah? Challah is the part that we take off to give to the Kohen. This is the anti-challah. This is the non-challah. And everyone there is stumped. Then you come in for the kill. And you let them know, because this is what the mitzvah is all about. And that's what we're focused on. Short, sweet, and it works every week. At least one time that you're there. The next week you might need something else. But we'll give you some more ammunition along the way, as my father-in-law calls it. Okay, guys, we'll call it over here.
Thank you so much.
Okay? I'm away for a long weekend, but I'll be back for Tuesday night. So next week we are on regular.
Where are you
Okay.
going?
I'm going to DC.
Cool.
DC is Devorah Senior, my daughter, who happens to live in DC. So we're going to spend a long weekend with her. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good seeing you, Ori, Ryan, Arasia. Good night, everyone.